The water burned my skin, scalding hot. But I didn't care. It was the only thing keeping me grounded. I stood under the gym's showerhead, eyes shut, letting the steam swallow the ache of another sleepless night. Then, without warning, the curtain ripped open, and he was there, his shadow looming, his breath cutting through the haze. My name is Ethan Carter, 24, a graphic designer scraping by in Chicago's gritty underbelly. I'd been coming to Iron Pulse Gym for months, a rundown spot where the weights clanged louder than the conversations. It was my escape from a life that felt like it was unraveling, bills piling up, a family that didn't call, and a heart that hadn't felt anything real in years. That night, I thought I was alone. I was wrong. His name was Lucas Reed, a stranger who'd been showing up at the gym lately, always lingering at the edge of my vision. He was lean but strong, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to see through you. He didn't belong here, not in this grimy corner of the city. Yet there he was, standing in the shower's threshold, shirtless, his gaze locked on mine. "Didn't mean to startle you," he said, voice low, almost drowned by the water's roar. "Just needed to cool off." I froze, my pulse hammering. The air thickened with something unspoken, something dangerous. This wasn't just a moment, it was a collision. I should have told him to leave. I should have turned away. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped back, letting the water hit my shoulders, and muttered, "Plenty of room." My voice sounded braver than I felt. Lucas hesitated, then stepped in, the curtain falling shut behind him. The space between us shrank, the steam curling around us like a secret. I didn't know him, but I knew this feeling, fear and want tangled so tight I couldn't breathe. Chicago's winters are brutal, but that night in late February felt colder inside than out. I'd grown up in a small Illinois town, where being different meant being invisible. My dad called me weak when I cried at 13, said real men didn't feel things so deeply. I buried that part of me, moved to the city, and built a life of routine, work, gym, sleep, repeat. But Lucas was chaos. He didn't fit into my carefully constructed walls. He turned on the showerhead next to mine, water streaming down his back. "You're here late," he said, casual, like we weren't standing half-naked in a moment that could ruin us. I shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "Couldn't sleep." He nodded, like he understood more than I'd said. "Yeah, me neither." We didn't talk much after that, but the silence was loud. Every glance, every brush of steam between us, felt like a question neither of us dared to ask. I'd spent years hiding who I was, dodging mirrors that showed too much. Lucas, Thuff, looked at me like he saw everything. And for the first time, I didn't want to hide. When we finally shut off the water, the cold hit like a slap. I grabbed my towel, heart racing, and he did the same. "See you around, Ethan," he said, my name sounding like a promise in his mouth. I nodded, unable to speak, and watched him disappear into the locker room. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the spark that would burn my world down and build it back up. The next week, I couldn't stop looking for him. Every clang of weights, every creak of the gym's door, made my stomach twist. I told myself it was nothing, just a fleeting moment. But deep down, I knew better. Lucas wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was a door I'd never opened, and I was terrified of what was on the other side. By Friday, he was there again, lifting weights in the corner, his movements deliberate, almost magnetic. I caught his eye across the room, and he smelled small, knowing curve of his lips. My chest tightened. I didn't know what this was, but I wanted to find out. I needed to. That night, I stayed late again, hoping. The gym emptied out. The lights dimmed, and I headed to the showers. My heart a drumbeat. I turned on the water, closed my eyes, and waited. The curtain moved. He was back. The steam was thicker this time, like it was trying to hide us from the world. Lucas stood there, closer than before, his eyes searching mine for something I wasn't sure I could give. "You're always here late," he said, his voice cutting through the hiss of the shower. I swallowed. My throat dry despite the water. "Yeah. It's quiet." I didn't tell him the truth that the gym was the only place I could outrun my thoughts. He nodded, stepping under the adjacent showerhead, and I caught the faint scar running across his shoulder, jagged like a story he hadn't told. "I'm Lucas. By the way," he said, though I already knew his name from overhearing it at the front desk. "Ethan," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. He smiled, and it was like a crack in my defenses. I turned away, focusing on the tiles, but I could feel his presence, heavy and undeniable. We didn't speak for a while, just let the water fill the silence. But every second felt charged, like static before a storm. I'd spent so long avoiding moments like this, moments where I might feel too much. Growing up, I'd learned to keep my head down, to blend in. My high school friends had thrown around words like fag without a second thought, and I'd laughed along, hating myself for it. I'd dated girls, played the part, but it was like wearing someone else's skin. Here, with Lucas, I felt exposed, like he could see the truth I'd buried. "You from around here?" he asked, breaking the quiet. I glanced at him, water dripping from his dark hair. "Not really. Small town. Couple hours out." "You?" He shrugged, his expression tightening. "Here and there. Chicago's home for now." There was a weight to his words, a story he wasn't telling. I wanted to ask, but something held me back. Instead, I said, "This place is a dump, but it's got character." He laughed, a low, warm sound that made my chest ache. "Yeah, kind of like us. Right." I froze, unsure if he meant it the way I heard it. Before I could respond, he turned off his shower and grabbed his towel. "See you tomorrow, Ethan." And he was gone again, leaving me with a racing heart and questions I couldn't ask. The next day, I couldn't focus. At work, my designs looked flat. My coffee went cold, and my mind kept drifting to Lucas's voice, his eyes, the way he seemed to see me. I'd never felt this pull before, this reckless need to know someone. It scared me. I'd built my life on control, on keeping my desires locked away. But Lucas was like a key I didn't know I'd lost. That night, I hit the gym harder than usual, pushing my body to drown out my thoughts. Lucas was there, spotting a guy on the bench press, his laughter echoing across the room. I hated how much I noticed him every move, every glance. When he caught my eye, he nodded, and I felt like I was falling. By the time I hit the showers, I was a mess of nerves. I told myself he wouldn't show. That last night was a fluke. But then the curtain moved, and there he was, his expression softer this time, almost vulnerable. "Mind if I join?" he asked, and I couldn't say no. We stood there, water pounding, the space between us shrinking with every breath. "You ever feel like you're running from something?" he said suddenly, his voice barely audible. I looked at him, Startled. All the time. I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He nodded, like he'd known my answer all along. That was when I saw a faint bruise on his wrist, half hidden by the water. My stomach twisted. You okay? I asked, nodding toward it. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he'd shut down. Then he said, not really, but I'm working on it. I wanted to push, to ask what he meant, but the moment felt fragile, like it could break if I pressed too hard. Instead, I said, if you need to talk, I'm here. It was the most honest thing I'd said in years. He looked at me, his eyes softening, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. The gym became my obsession, not for the weights but for him. Lucas was there most nights now, and every encounter left me unraveling. We'd talk in the showers. Small things at first: music, the city, the way the gym's owner always forgot to fix the flickering lights. But each conversation peeled back another layer, and I was starting to see him. He was 26, a freelance photographer who'd bounced around cities before landing in Chicago. He didn't talk much about his past, but there were hints of a guarded look when I mentioned family, a quick change of subject when I asked about the bruise. I didn't push. I knew what it was like to carry secrets. One night, after a brutal workout, we ended up in the showers again. The gym was nearly empty. The only sound the drip of a leaky faucet. You ever think about leaving? He asked, his voice low. I leaned against the wall, letting the water cool my skin. Chicago. Sometimes. But where would I go? He looked at me, his eyes intense. Somewhere you can be yourself. The words hit like a punch. I'd spent years pretending, hiding behind a version of Ethan that didn't scare anyone. Lucas saw through it, and it terrified me. What about you? I shot back, deflecting. You running from something? His smile was bitter. Maybe. But I'm tired of running. We stood there, the air heavy with things unsaid. I wanted to reach out, to touch him, but fear held me back. I'd never crossed that line, never let myself want this openly. But Lucas made me want to try. The next day, I saw him outside the gym, leaning against a lamppost, scrolling through his phone. My heart leapt. Hey, I called, trying to sound casual. He looked up, his face breaking into a grin. Didn't expect to see you out here, he said, pocketing his phone. Want to grab a coffee? I hesitated. This was new territory, stepping out of the gym's safe walls. But I nodded, and we ended up at a diner down the street. The kind with sticky tables and coffee that tasted like regret. We talked for hours about art, about dreams, about the way Chicago's skyline felt like a promise and a lie. He showed me photos on his phone. Raw, gritty shots of the city's forgotten corners. This is how I see the world, he said, and I realized I wanted to see it through his eyes. When we parted ways, the cold bit at my skin, but I felt warm. Lucas was becoming more than a momenthy, was a possibility. But that night, as I lay in bed, doubt crept in. What was I doing? I wasn't out. Not really. My coworkers didn't know. My family didn't know. I'd built a life on lies. And Lucas was a truth I wasn't sure I could handle. The next week, things shifted. Lucas was quieter, his smiles less frequent. I noticed new marks of faint cut on his lip, a shadow under his eye. You okay? I asked one night in the showers, my voice soft. He didn't meet my eyes. Just a rough week, he said, but I didn't believe him. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. Then came the night that changed everything. The gym was dead. Just us and the hum of the fluorescent lights. We were in the showers. The water a steady rhythm. "Ethan," he said, his voice breaking. I turned, and he was closer than ever, his hand reaching out, stopping just short of my arm. "I need to tell you something." My heart stopped. I nodded, unable to speak. He took a breath. His eyes locked on mine. I'm not okay. And I don't know how to be." His voice cracked, and I saw the weight he'd been carrying: fear, shame, something darker. I stepped closer, the water blurring between us. "You don't have to be okay," I said. "Just be here." For a moment, we just stood there, inches apart, the world falling away. Then he leaned in, and I didn't pull back. His lips were soft, hesitant, but they burned against mine. The kiss was brief, barely a moment, but it shattered every wall I'd built. Lucas pulled back, his eyes wide, like he was as shocked as I was. "I'm sorry," he whispered, stepping away, water dripping from his hair. "I shouldn't have." "Don't," I said, my voice rough. "Don't apologize." My heart was racing, but I wasn't scared anymore. I was alive. I reached for his hand, my fingers brushing his, and he didn't pull away. We stood there, the shower's roar fading into the background, our breaths sinking in the steam. That kiss changed everything. We didn't talk about it. Not that night. But when we left the gym, walking side by side into the freezing Chicago night, something had shifted. Lucas wasn't just a stranger anymore, was mine, in a way I couldn't explain. The next few weeks were a blur of stolen moments. Coffee at the diner, late-night talks in the gym's empty locker room, his hand brushing mine when no one was looking. I was falling, hard, and it felt like flying and drowning at once. Lucas was guarded, but he opened up in pieces stories of a childhood in foster homes, a brother who didn't speak to him, a life of running from who he was. I told him about my dad, about the years I'd spent pretending, about the ache of wanting more. But there were shadows. The bruises on Lucas kept appearing, new ones, faint but undeniable. He brushed them off, said he was clumsy, but I saw the fear in his eyes. One night, as we sat in the diner, I grabbed his wrist, gently turning it to see the fresh marks. "Lucas," I said, my voice low, "who's doing this?" He pulled away, his jaw tight. "It's nothing, Ethan. Just let it go." But I couldn't. I knew what it looked like: someone was hurting him, and he was too scared to say who. I wanted to protect him, but I didn't know how to fight a ghost. The gym became our sanctuary, the only place we could be ourselves. One night, as we stood in the showers, he told me more. "My ex," he said, his voice barely audible. "He's not a good guy. I thought I could leave, but he keeps finding me." My stomach dropped. I'd suspected, but hearing it was different. "You don't have to go back," I said, stepping closer. "You can stay with me." He looked at me, his eyes raw. "You don't know what you're offering." But I did. I was offering everything: me heart, my home, my life. I was terrified, but I'd never been so sure. That night, we left the gym together, walking to my apartment. It was small, cluttered with sketchbooks and empty coffee cups. But Lucas looked at it like it was a palace. We didn't talk much, just sat on my couch, his head on my shoulder. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. But trouble doesn't stay away forever. A week later, I saw him, a man outside the gym, watching us. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it was carved from stone. Lucas froze when he saw him, his hand tightening on mine. "That's him," he whispered, and I felt the fear radiating off him. I wanted to confront the guy, to tell him to back off. But Lucas pulled me away. "Don't," he said, his voice shaking. "He's dangerous." We ducked into an alley, my heart pounding, and I realized this was bigger than us. Lucas wasn't just running from his pa, that was running for his life. That night, in my apartment, he told me everything. His ex, Derek, was controlling, violent, a shadow that followed him everywhere. Lucas had tried to leave, but Derek always found him. "I thought I could start over here," he said, tears in his eyes. "But he won't let me go." I held him, promising I'd keep him safe. But deep down, I knew promises weren't enough. We were in a fight we hadn't chosen, and I wasn't sure we could win. I started noticing things I hadn't before: the way Lucas checked his phone constantly, the way he flinched at loud noises. He was living on edge, and it was breaking my heart. I wanted to fix it, to take away his fear. But I was just a guy with a sketchbook and a minimum wage job. What could I do against someone like Derek? We kept meeting at the gym, our moments in the showers becoming a lifeline. One night, as the water cascaded around us, Lucas looked at me with an intensity that stopped my breath. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Why do you care?" I didn't have an answer. Not really. All I knew was that he'd woken something in me I'd buried for years. "Because you're worth it," I said, and I meant it. He kissed me then, harder than before, and it felt like a vow. But the real world doesn't care about vows. Derek was getting closer. One night, as we left the gym, I saw his car, a black SUV, parked across the street. Lucas's face went pale. "He knows I'm here," he whispered. I pulled him into the gym's back entrance, my mind racing. We couldn't keep running forever. I started researching shelters, restraining orders, anything that could help. But Lucas was hesitant. "You don't know him," he said one night in my apartment, his voice trembling. "He's got connections. Cops. Friends in high places. If I fight back, it'll get worse." I felt helpless, but I wasn't giving up. I started asking around, discreetly. The gym's owner, a gruff guy named Tony, noticed my worry. "You in trouble, kid?" he asked one night. I told him enough. Someone was after Lucas. Someone dangerous. Tony didn't ask questions. "If you need a place to crash, the back room's empty," he said. It wasn't much, but it was something. We started spending more time at the gym, avoiding Lucas's apartment. But Derek was relentless. One night, as we walked to my place, I heard footsteps behind us. I turned, and there he was, Derek, his eyes cold and unyielding. "Lucas," he said, his voice like gravel. "We need to talk." I stepped in front of Lucas, my fists clenched. "He's done talking to you," I said, my voice shaking but firm. Derek laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "You think you can protect him?" he said. "You don't know what you're up against." Lucas grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Ethan, don't," he pleaded. But I couldn't back down. "Leave him alone," I said, staring Derek down. For a moment, he just looked at me, like he was sizing me up. Then he turned and walked away, his laughter echoing in the dark. That night, Lucas broke down in my arms. "I'm dragging you into this," he sobbed. "You should walk away." But I couldn't. I loved him, 3 words I hadn't said yet, but they burned in my chest. "I'm not going anywhere," I told him, holding him tight. The next day, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Derek win. I called a friend from work, Mia, who knew people in the legal aid world. She put me in touch with a lawyer who worked pro bono for abuse survivors. It was a long shot, but it was a start. Lucas was scared, but he agreed to meet the lawyer. We sat in a cramped office, his hand in mine, as he told his story: years of control, fear, and pain. The lawyer listened, her face calm but determined. "We can get a restraining order," she said. "It won't solve everything, but it's a step." For the first time, I saw hope in Lucas's eyes. But I knew this was just the beginning. Derek wasn't going to let go easily, and I wasn't sure we were ready for the fight ahead. But we had each other, and that was enough to keep going. The restraining order was a piece of paper, not a shield, but it gave Lucas a spark of courage. He started staying at my place more, his camera always with him, capturing moments of the city that felt like glimpses of his soul. I loved watching him work, the way his eyes lit up when he framed a shot. But the fear was still there, lurking like a shadow. Derek didn't disappear. He'd show up outside the gym, just far enough to avoid breaking the order. He'd call Lucas from blocked numbers, leaving voicemails that made Lucas tremble. I wanted to hunt him down, to end this. But Lucas begged me to stay out of it. "He wants a reaction," he said. "Don't give him one." I tried to listen, but it was hard. Every bruise, every flinch, made my blood boil. One night, in the gym's showers, Lucas broke down again. "I don't deserve this," he whispered, his voice raw. "I don't deserve you." I pulled him close, the water soaking us both. "You deserve everything," I said, and I meant it. We started building a life together, small but real. Lucas moved in, his clothes mixing with mine, his photos on my walls. We'd cook dinner, laugh at bad TV, and for a while, it felt like we could outrun the past. But Derek was always there, a ghost we couldn't shake. One night, everything exploded. We were walking home from the gym, hand in hand, when Derek stepped out of the shadows. He was drunk, his eyes wild. "You think you can just leave me?" he shouted, lunging at Lucas. I pushed Lucas behind me, my heart pounding. "Stay back," I warned. But Derek wasn't listening. He swung at me, his fist grazing my jaw. I stumbled but didn't fall. Lucas screamed, grabbing Derek's arm, but Derek shoved him hard, sending him crashing to the ground. Something in me snapped. I tackled Derek, pinning him to the pavement, my fists ready but shaking. "Leave him alone," I yelled, my voice echoing in the empty street. Derek laughed, even as he struggled. "You're nothing," he spat. "He'll leave you too." But Lucas was on his feet, pulling me back. "Ethan, stop," he pleaded. "He's not worth it." I let go, my chest heaving, and Derek scrambled up, disappearing into the night. We went home, shaken but together. Lucas cleaned the cut on my jaw, his hands trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." I kissed him, soft but sure. "We're in this together," I said, and I meant it. The next day, we went to the police. The restraining order had been violated. And this time, they listened. Derek was arrested. But we knew it wasn't over. He'd be out soon. And he'd be angrier. We needed a plan. Mia, my friend from work, came through again. She connected us with a shelter that helped people like Lucas, people escaping abuse. People who didn't fit into the world's neat boxes. They offered resources, a safe place, a way forward. Lucas was hesitant, but I could see the weight lifting. Just a little. That night, in the gym's showers, we stood closer than ever. I love you, I said, the words spilling out like they'd been waiting forever. Lucas's eyes widened, then softened. I love you too, he whispered. And we kissed, the water washing away the fear. If only for a moment. We weren't safe yet, but we were stronger. Together, we could face anything, even the ghosts that wouldn't let go. Derek's arrest bought us time, but not peace. Lucas was quieter, his smiles rarer, like he was waiting for the next blow. I tried to keep things light, cooking him breakfast, dragging him to art galleries, but the fear was always there, a shadow we couldn't outrun. The gym was still our safe place, the showers our confession booth. One night, as the water ran cold, Lucas told me about his dreams traveling the world, photographing places no one else saw. I want you there, he said, his voice soft. When I'm free. I held him, promising we'd make it happen. But I wondered if freedom was possible while Derek was still out there. The shelter helped. They gave Lucas counseling, legal advice, a community that understood. I went with him sometimes, sitting in on group sessions where people shared stories that echoed his. It was hard, hearing the pain, but it made me love him more, his strength, his resilience, the way he still found beauty in a broken world. But Derek wasn't done. A month after his arrest, he showed up at my apartment. It was late, the city quiet except for the knock at the door. I opened it, thinking it was a neighbor, and there he was, taller, angrier, his eyes burning with rage. Where is he? He demanded, pushing past me. Lucas was in the kitchen, and when he saw Derek, he froze. I stepped between them, my heart pounding. Get out, I said, my voice steady despite the fear. Derek laughed, a cold, hollow sound. You think you're his hero? You're nothing. Lucas stepped forward, his voice shaking but firm. I'm done with you, Derek. It's over. For a moment, Derek just stared, like he couldn't believe it. Then he lunged, and I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed him, shoving him against the wall, my arm across his chest. Leave, I said, my voice low. Or I call the cops. He smirked, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He left, slamming the door behind him. Lucas collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I'm so tired, he whispered. I held him, my own tears falling. I know, I said, but you're not alone. We filed another report, and the police tightened the restraining order. But we knew it wasn't enough. Derek was a storm, and we were still in its path. Mia suggested we leave Chicago, start over somewhere new. It was a crazy idea, but it planted a seed. That night, in the showers, Lucas looked at me with a fire I hadn't seen before. Let's do it, he said. Let's leave. Together. My heart leapt, but fear followed. I had a job, a life, however small. But then I looked at Lucas, at the hope in his eyes, and I knew I'd follow him anywhere. We started planning. Seattle. Maybe. Or Portland, somewhere far from Derek's reach. We saved every penny. Sold what we didn't need. It wasn't easy. My boss wasn't thrilled. And Lucas's fear of being found never faded. But we had each other. And that was enough. One night, as we packed, Lucas pulled out his camera and showed me a photo, a blurry shot of us in the gym. Laughing, unaware of the lens. "This is us," he said, his voice soft. "This is what I want to keep." I kissed him, my heart full. We were building something new. Something ours. But storms don't die quietly. As we prepared to leave, Derek made his final move. It was our last night in Chicago. The apartment was bare. Our lives packed into 2 duffel bags. We were heading to Seattle, a city where the rain might wash away the past. Lucas was nervous but hopeful, his camera slung over his shoulder like a lifeline. I loved him more than I'd ever thought possible. We went to the gym one last time. A goodbye to the place where it all began. The showers were empty, the water warm and familiar. We stood there, holding each other, letting the steam carry away the weight of the last few months. "We're really doing this," Lucas whispered, his voice full of wonder. I kissed him, promising a future we could both believe in. But as we left the gym, Derek was waiting. He stood across the street, his face a mask of rage. This time, he wasn't alone. 2 guys flanked him, their eyes cold. My stomach dropped. Lucas grabbed my hand, his grip tight. "Run," he whispered, but I shook my head. Running hadn't worked. It was time to stand. Derek crossed the street, his steps deliberate. "You think you can just disappear?" he said, his voice dripping with venom. I stepped in front of Lucas, my heart racing but my resolve firm. "We're done with you," I said. "Leave us alone." He laughed, but it was hollow. "You're nothing without me," he told Lucas, ignoring me. Lucas stepped forward, his voice steady. "I was nothing with you," he said. "Now I'm free." Derek's face twisted, and he lunged. But before he could reach us, Tony, the gym's owner, appeared, a baseball bat in his hand. "Get out of here, Derek," he growled. "Cops are on their way." Derek froze, his eyes darting between us. For the first time, he looked small, powerless. He backed off, his friends following, and disappeared into the night. The police arrived, and we gave our statements. Derek was arrested again, this time with witnesses and a clear violation. We didn't know what would happen next, but we knew we were done running. The next morning, we boarded a bus to Seattle. Lucas leaned against me, his camera in his lap, the city fading behind us. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything." I kissed his forehead, my heart full. "We saved each other," I said. In Seattle, we started over. Lucas got a job at a small gallery, his photos drawing crowds. I found freelance work, sketching designs in a city that felt like home. We rented a tiny apartment, filled it with laughter and love, and built a life that was ours. The gym showers were where it started, a moment of fear and want that changed everything. But it was the fight, the love, the choice to keep going that made us who we were. Lucas taught me to be brave, to live without hiding. And I showed him he was worth fighting for. One night, as we stood on our balcony, the Seattle rain soft around us. Lucas took my hand. "This is freedom," he said, his eyes bright. I nodded. pulling him close. We'd face the worst and come out stronger. Together, we were unstoppable,